We're going live. All right. We are going to determine the equation of a radical function from a graph. So like we did in chapter 1, I'll do the 6 steps. Okay? If you want to manipulate the points and come up with a mapping rule and work backwards, you're free to do that as well. But when I look at this function right here, a prime, b prime, c prime, d prime's off the grid, but know that it is a transformation of y equals f of x. What are the key points on the square root of x? Y equals the square root of x. They're on the board here. 0, 0, 1, 1, 4, 2, 9, 3. So I've got point A, B, C, and D. That's my base function. In chapter 2, this is the base function. And I'm going to join these points with a nice smooth curve. So this is y equals the square root of x, or f of x equals the square root of x. Everyone cool with that? Our job is to come up with the equation of g at x. It is a transformation of this guy right here. What I need to do, just like I did in chapter 1, is I need to ask myself, is there any reflections? All right, well, let's have a look at this. I hear someone say yes. What axis is it reflected in? It's reflected in the x-axis. Check this out. 0, 0, if I reflected that point in the x-axis, if I multiplied the y-coordinate by -1, it wouldn't change. What would this point become? 1, 1 would become 1, -1. 4, 2 would become 4, -2. And 9, 3 would become 9, -3. Now, just have a look at the transformed curve. So A prime, B prime, C prime, and D prime. Does it look kind of like that? Like, does my transformed curve point down and to the right? Yes, it does. So you were correct in saying it was reflected in the x-axis. Okay? So I will back that off. Get rid of those points. Whoops. And I will say reflection in x-axis. What does that mean? What does that say about the parameter A? A is a negative, Kate. Great. A is less than 0. Let's check to see if it's reflected in the y-axis. If this was reflected in the y-axis, this point wouldn't change. That would be A prime. Remember, if you reflect in the y-axis, you multiply the x-coordinate by -1. So 0, 0 would remain 0, 0. But what about 1, 1? -1, 1. And 4, 2 would become -4, 2, and then -9, 3. It would go A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime. Does my transformed curve point to the left? No, it doesn't. So is it reflected in the y-axis? No, it is not. So there is no reflection in the y-axis. My b value should be a what? Positive. Cool? On to step 2, the vertical stretch factor. I'm going with the new over the old, not the old over the new. When you do this, you have to compare apples to apples. What I mean by that is if I'm going to look from A prime to B prime, I'd have to compare it to A to B. Or if I'm going to go from A prime to C prime and count those units, I'd have to compare it to A to C. If I went A prime to D prime, which I'm not going to do in this case, because D prime's not even labeled, I'd have to go A to D. Are you with me on that? Okay, how many units is it from A prime to B prime? What's the Y value right there? And what's the Y value down here? -1. It's 4 units. That's right, Buck. 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks. That is the new. Now, if I looked from A prime to B prime, I'd have to compare it to what? On the original, A to B. That's at a height of 0. That's at a height of 1. How many units is that? 1. So it's going to be 4 over 1, which means the vertical stretch factor is what? It's 4. That means that my A value could be plus or minus 4. Which one do I pick, positive or negative? Why do I pick a negative? Because it was reflected in the xi. Look it up here. This is saying that A is less than 0. That's what I found in step 1. Now I just want to show you that I could get the same answer if I went from A prime to C prime. From 3 down to -5. How many units is that? -5 to 3. It doesn't matter if you go down or up. From -5 up to 3 or from 3 down to -5. 8 units. So I put an 8 on top of, or 8 divided by, but now go A to C from 0 to 2. What's 8 divided by 2? 4. I'm going to get 4 either way. Are you with me on that? Cool. What comes next? HSF, the horizontal stretch factor. Once again, it's new over old, but this time I'm looking left to right. I'm not looking up and down. So once again, if I want to go from A prime to B prime, that's at an x value of what? A prime. A prime, what's the x value? -2. B prime, what's the x value? How many units is that? 1. So I'm going to write 1 on top. If I go from A prime to B prime, I got to compare it to A to B. Okay? That's right. Back here, look at A is at an x value of 0. B is at an x value of 1. That's also how many units? 1. So I'm going to write 1 over 1. Watch if I went from A prime to C prime and A to C. Okay, it's still going to give me a horizontal stretch of 1, or no horizontal stretch, right? Check this out. If I go from A prime, which is at -2, to C prime, which is at positive, an x value of +2, from -2 over to +2 is 4 units. Now compare it from A to C, from an x value of 0 to an x value of 4. That's also 4 units. What's 4 divided by 4? 1. Now, remember, what's the relationship between the horizontal stretch factor and the B value? They are what? Reciprocals. What's the reciprocal of 1? Yeah, like you could write this 1 over 1 if you wanted, which is really just plus or minus 1. Now, how do I know which one to pick? And did we say there was a reflection in the y-axis, yes or no? No. So if there's no reflection in the y-axis, I must pick a b value of +1. Cool? The horizontal translation and vertical translation are super easy in this unit, because what point is on the original? On the old curve, on f of x? 0, 0. So whatever 0, 0 flips to, that's like whatever A goes to A prime, you could find your H and K value right from that. Remember last unit we said for the horizontal translation, you try and pick a point on the original curve, so in this case A, where the x coordinate is 0. And all that does is I don't have to worry about the stretch factor. I don't have to go 1 over b times 0 plus h equals my new x value, because 1 over b, whatever b happens to be, if I multiply it by 0, I'm going to get 0. So it's really just isolating the translation. What did that point become? -2, 3. If I go up, A prime is -2, 2 to the left, up 3. Brilliant. Can you tell me what my h value would be? That's right. H is -2. Simple as that. Like really, I should go 1 over 1 over b times 0, this one, add h, and it would give me -2. 1 over 1 is 1, times 0 is 0, 0 plus h is h. H equals -2. Easy peasy. Do I have to do that? Like, do I have to show this? No, not in this unit, because like 0, 0, we're always transforming this curve in chapter 2. Step 5 is the vertical translation. And once again, I'm going to compare A, 0, 0, to A prime, -2, 3. Remember in chapter 1, we try to pick a point on the original curve where the y coordinate is 0 when I'm looking for the vertical translation. Does anyone know what my k value would be? 3. K equals 3. Here's why that happens. Really, I should multiply that y coordinate by A, which is -2. What was it, -4? Yeah, not -2, it was -4. If I look back to step 2, my A value was a -4. -4 times this y coordinate of 0 plus k equals this y value 3. Well, -4 times 0 is 0. 0 plus k is k. K equals 3. What would I write for the equation? G at x equals. What parameter comes first, A, B, H, or K? A. What should I write for A? -4. Now, I'm not going to write the f for function like I did in chapter 1. What type of function are we working with in chapter 2? I'm going to write a big square root curve. What comes inside the square root? My b value, 1. Then I'm going to open a bracket, and I'm going to write x minus, what goes in the bracket with the x? So I'm going to write x minus -2. Finish your statement, Kate, if you'd like. That's going to become what? Yeah, +2. And then what would I write at the back? The k value. Note that the square root stops right here. When I clean this up, g at x equals -4 times the square root of x plus 2. I don't need that 1 there, right? 2 negatives are going to make a positive, so that's why it's a +2. 1 times x plus 2 would just be x plus 2 plus 3. That is the equation. Cool with that? Yeah, her question is, do I have to write x minus -2? Absolutely not. No, you have to show what's in the box there. The reason I'm doing that is so that when you go home and compare this to Like this is what the equation should look like. This is what it says on the whiteboard. A times the square root of B, and then in brackets, x minus h plus k. I just filled it in exactly as I seen it, then I clean it up. Cool? And if you had to make a mapping rule, it didn't ask you to this, but what would the mapping rule look like? This is what it asked for, the equation. The mapping rule would go x comma y, 1 over, what's my b value? 1 times x plus, what's my h value? -2, and then I'm going to go, what times y? -4 times y plus k. What's k? 3. And if I clean this up, I'd end up with the following. X minus 2. 1 over 1 is 1 times x is x. Plus -2 is like saying x minus 2. -4y plus 3. Now you should be able to verify that if I filled 0, 0, a 0 in for x, a 0 in for y, took point A, and I run it through the mapping rule, what's 0 minus 2? -2. What's -4 times 0? 0 plus 3. -2 comma 3. So 0 comma 0 becomes -2 comma 3. If I took point B, 1 comma 1, what should it become? What's B prime? What's it show right here? So let's just check it out. If I fill a 1 in for x, what's 1 minus 2? If I fill a 1 in for y, what's -4 times 1? Plus 3. 1 comma 1 would become -1 comma -1. Story checks out. It would work for all the points. We good? Can I do one quick one? Like I'll just rip through this one. Okay. Does anyone know if it's reflected or not? What should you compare it with? How do I start this question? It's asking the same thing. You have it on the back of your sheet. Determine the equation. It's reflected in the y-axis. Wicked. Okay, so I've got A, B, C, and D. And look at the original points up and to the right. If the transform points to the left, well, you had to go across the y-axis. If the transformed points down, you had to go across the x-axis. If the transform goes left and down, then you went across both. If the transformed equation still points up and to the right, you didn't reflect in either axis. Whoever said reflected in the y-axis, you are correct. What does that mean if it's reflected in the y-axis? B is less than 0. Step 2, vertical stretch factor. I'm comparing y values. Now again, I can go from A prime to B prime, but I'd have to compare it A to B. Or I could go A prime to C prime, I'd have to go A to C. I usually just stick with the first 2 points. What would that be? From a height of -3 to a height of -2. It's 1. What about here on the original? From a height of 0, point B has a height of 1. I'm going to write 1 divided by 1. What's the vertical stretch factor? That means that A would be plus or minus 1. Which one? Plus 1. Why do I pick a positive 1? because it wasn't reflected in the x-axis. So really, there's no reflection in the x-axis, and there's no stretch about the x-axis. A is just a 1. Let's go with the horizontal stretch factor. This time I'm looking left to right. A prime to B prime. That's at an x value of 4. That's at an x value of 2. How many units between 2 and 4? 2. Okay, so it's going to be 2 over, compare A to B. That is a 1, correct. From 0 to 1. So I've got a horizontal stretch factor of 2 over 1, which is just 2. That means that B could be plus or minus what, guys? 1/2, the reciprocal of 2. And which one do I pick? A negative 1/2. Great. Why do I pick a negative 1/2? It was reflected in the y-axis. Now, you can really do step 4 and step 5 together. The horizontal translation and the vertical translation together. What point do I want to use? 0, 0. What did it become? Can anyone tell me the coordinates of A prime? It's on your sheet. 4, negative 3. Can anyone tell me what the H value is going to be? H would be 4. What's the K value? Minus 3. When it comes to writing the equation, H is 4, K is negative 3. My equation for G at X, step 6. I fill in my A value, 1. I write a square root. I fill in my B value, negative 1/2. X minus 4 in a bracket. Close the bracket. And then a minus 3 at the back. When you clean this up, there's what we're left with. Any issues, concerns? No? I think we're good too. These are the questions I'd like you to do. 2, 5, 6, 9, and 10 on page 73, 72 and 73. So question 2 and 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's practicing with the sketching, the transforming. 6, 9, and 10, that's more of... No, my B value was negative 1/2. Reciprocal. Good?